Thank you for your wonderful and steady support over the last 3.5 years that I've been in this position, and for your lifelong commitment, really, to the issue of human rights. I also want to acknowledge, as you did, the special role that Congressman Lantos played in the Burma debate historically, and it's very fitting that this hearing is before the Lantos Commission. As you know, the last 18 months brought a number of changes to Burma, from the release of hundreds of political prisoners to the revision of repressive laws, things that many of us would have thought unthinkable even a couple of years ago. These developments have been a vindication of Aung San Suu Kyi's support for reform, and now with the tide of reform she helped to put in motion moving forward, she remains a symbol of hope and freedom in Burma. Today, our government is seeking to support both the government and people of Burma as they seize this opportunity for change. But we recognize that here, as elsewhere, change comes slowly, and that there will be a long and bumpy road to get there. But as it does move forward, we continue to want to be a long-term partner in this reform process. Last November, President Obama visited Burma and welcomed the progress that's being made, and he urged further action. In the course of his visit, the government of Burma had committed to 11 substantial steps to deepen and advance the reform process. So I want to here today talk about 4 areas where human rights issues are playing themselves out and where progress still needs to be made. The first relates to political prisoners, which you also made reference to. We're engaged with the government and have been over the last 18 months in an extensive way in reviewing prisoner lists and presenting those lists and having a range of discussions with government officials. Nearly 800 political prisoners have now been released, including most of the high-profile dissidents. But the story does not end there. Recently, the government formed a political prisoner review committee, which actually held its first meeting earlier this month. The work of the committee is not going to be easy, but its existence is a step forward, and it has the potential not only to deal with the specific cases, the 200 and some cases you mentioned, but also to be part of a healing process and a move towards national reconciliation. We really see 3 potential benefits from this committee's work. First, it can accurately determine the number of remaining political prisoners and prompt their unconditional release. Secondly, as the committee considers specific cases, it will have an opportunity to identify laws that need to be reformed as part of a broader law reform process. This is not part of the committee's initial mandate, but it can be an important collateral benefit as the society moves forward. And finally, the committee has the potential to help advance efforts to provide care and facilitate the reintegration of released prisoners. As in any situation where there are long-term detentions, people have a range of economic, psychological, social problems. The committee can help address those, and we stand ready to help. The second broad area for us is the area of law reform. The Constitution is a foundational document for any society and part of a broader effort to reform and build the rule of law. In the run-up to the 2015 national elections, we see there being an opportunity for the people and government to debate and decide how to address these broader constitutional issues. A range of people within the country have called for changes in the 2008 Constitution. We see this as an appropriate moment to have that discussion. There are a range of other laws. In my written testimony, I go through them. The government has begun some of the reform efforts in the labor area, for example, but there is a long list of things where laws need to be reviewed. Many of those laws are holdover from colonial administration. The government should pay particular attention to laws in the area of media and electronics, restricting membership and associations, and vaguely defined national security laws. There are broader structural issues, the independence of the judiciary is far from achieved. Lawyers have been disqualified. There isn't yet a single lawyer on the Supreme Court. These are areas where the government and the society need to move forward. The government's taken some steps. It's reintegrated some of those lawyers, restored their licenses, and undertaken to create a formal bar association, an independent bar association, which the country's never had. We need to continue to push on those issues. Third, as you mentioned, the problems in Kachin State and in the Rakhine State. Many of the country's natural resources are located in ethnic nationality regions, particularly in Kachin State, where war is being waged for both reasons of political autonomy and control over resources. The ongoing fighting has contributed to human rights abuses and social instability. There are estimated tens of thousands of Kachin IDPs, many of them cut off from international humanitarian aid. In our discussions with the government, we really stress the urgent need to grant immediate access for humanitarian organizations to all of those in need. There have been some very recent signs of improvement, recent visits by the ICRC, by the Red Cross, and UN OCHA to begin to provide limited access to deliver the aid that's needed, but we're hopeful that those visits will produce sustained access. We remain concerned also, and you mentioned it in your opening comments, about the situation in Rakhine State, which has resulted in more than 100,000 IDPs since violence erupted last year. Practical interventions to prevent further violence, along with training, conflict mediation, dialogue, facilitation, community dialogue, are all necessary. For right now, our immediate approach is to deliver humanitarian aid to reduce the prospect of future violence. In the longer term, solutions are going to require comprehensive reintegration and reconciliation of both the Rohingya and Rakhine communities. We're also concerned about the spread of anti-Muslim sentiments from Rakhine states, but in other parts of the country as well. We're concerned about reports of human rights, of religious freedom violations in ethnic nationality regions, including reports of sexual violence, use of churches as military bases, and coercive religious conversions in Chin State. The fourth and final area for us, and it's also something you mentioned, is the relationship of the political economy to a rights-respecting democracy. President Thein Sein has pledged to do business differently, but for decades there's been economic mismanagement, which has driven Burma to become the poorest country in Southeast Asia. We're committed to supporting the reform efforts. In 2012, we broadly authorized new investments in Burma for the first time in 15 years. My colleague Patrick will talk about that, but we are mindful of the fact that military-owned enterprises continue to dominate the scene. We've made it clear that military-owned enterprises will not benefit from our opening. U.S. companies are not authorized to make payment to the military to provide security, but we understand that in many places the military has been a primary driver of the worst human rights violations. Some have argued that our reporting requirements are too onerous and discourage investment. Others argue that they're too permissive. We've also heard from some American companies that, for example, our reporting requirements, which were just noted in the Federal Register last week, are a good thing, and we're going to introduce those and implement them this summer. Our intention is to strike the right balance, guarding against an economic free-for-all that would funnel investment to the military and companies connected with them while incentivizing responsible investment. Let me just close by saying that having visited Burma 4 times and seen the evolution, I'm optimistic because I'm optimistic about the Burmese people. There is a pent-up demand for reform, for people to live in dignity. People want economic opportunity and a job, and they also want a stake in their country's political future. And I think as we look to 2015, the United States has a very important role reinforcing those agents of change and encouraging the reform process to continue rather than to stall. So I appreciate your efforts, and thanks for the time.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. We'll now hear from Acting Special Representative and Policy Coordinator for Burma, Patrick Murphy of the Bureau for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, and who's a Red Sox fan. We won't tell Joe Crowley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate your invitation and the interest that you and your colleagues have in Burma that has been sustained for many years. Congress has really been instrumental in shaping our Burma policy and has, in fact, been a very valued partner of this administration in implementing a principled engagement with Burma. This has yielded an unprecedented transition in a country that until recently was characterized by 50 years of intractable authoritarian rule. Let me, too, add to my colleague's observation that it's an honor to appear before a commission named for the late Congressman Lantos, who really was one of the strongest advocates for human rights and democracy in Burma. And I had the privilege of collaborating with him in the 1990s on these efforts. So thank you also for the other members of the Commission who have had a sustained interest in Burma, including Representative Crawley, who's had the opportunity to travel there and see Burma firsthand. Mr. Chairman, we have entered truly a new era of relations between Burma and the United States. Over the past 2 years, President Thein Sein's government has undertaken an unexpected but ambitious agenda of reform. For over 2 decades, the United States and the international community labored for the freedom of pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi and many political prisoners. Now, she and others from her previously banned National League for Democracy serve in Parliament, and former prisoners of conscience play a central role in the transition to democracy. Her remarkable visit to Washington last September to receive the Congressional Gold Medal, which you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, was a ceremony that included one of Burma's most senior government ministers. This ceremony spoke not only of her extraordinary courage and journey, but also of unwavering U.S. support for the aspirations of the Burmese people in pursuing democracy and basic human rights. The Burmese government has taken other significant steps. Parliament has established worker rights. The government has relaxed media censorship, outlawed forced labor, and taken steps to eliminate child soldiers. These measures respond directly to our longstanding concerns, and Burmese authorities have welcomed and pursued international advice and assistance each step of the way. The U.S. government, in partnership with Congress, has responded to these reforms to recognize and encourage further progress. We elevated our diplomatic ties by exchanging ambassadors. We reestablished a U.S. aid mission in Rangoon. With recent congressional legislation, we've supported the re-engagement of the World Bank, the Asia Development Bank, and the IMF to address widespread poverty. We also modified our sanctions regime, transitioning to a more calibrated approach that allows U.S. business and non-governmental organizations to apply their high standards in bringing responsible investment and American ingenuity to the reform effort. In November 2012, President Obama became the first sitting U.S. president to visit Burma. He affirmed U.S. support for democracy and freedom and emphasized the centrality of human rights to our bilateral relationship. Recognizing progress there, he also expressed our unwavering support for the aspirations of all the people of Burma. However, as the President very clearly expressed, we are not under any illusion that this transition is complete. Burma is at the beginning of a very arduous and difficult journey. The country has faced internal conflict since independence, right after World War II. Burma has suffered a half-century of military rule and fallen far behind even the poorest of its neighbors. We have before us, however, an historic opportunity to help Burma solidify its progress and strengthen the hand of those seeking further reform so that the process becomes irreversible. Indeed, President Obama's visit to Burma catalyzed further reform. The Burmese government committed to international standards on human rights, good governance, non-proliferation, transparency, and trafficking in persons. Many of these commitments have already yielded positive results, including improved international humanitarian access to conflict areas, dialogue with armed ethnic groups, and greater freedom of association. Nonetheless, we will express a strong and consistent voice where progress has yet to be achieved. Burma must deepen efforts to fully respect human rights, end internal conflict, address constitutional deficiencies, broaden a top-down reform process to embrace the participation of women, ethnic minorities, and rural Burmese, promote religious tolerance, improve social services, address land rights, and meet international standards on transparency and anti-corruption. This is a very long list. These efforts require significant international support and vigilance, and we maintain strong coordination with our partners in Rangoon, at the United Nations, and in capitals around the world. One of Burma's most significant challenges is achieving the national unity that has eluded the country since independence. Preliminary ceasefires with armed groups have yet to address underlying political grievances. Burma faces ongoing conflict in its northern Kachin state following the collapse of an uneasy peace. An uptick in violence between the Burmese army and the Kachin Independence Army was accompanied by very disturbing reports of human rights abuses. We have pressed for humanitarian access to displaced populations and for a dialogue aimed at achieving peace. While positive signs of such access and dialogue are emerging, both sides must overcome deep mistrust and understand that conflict brings unacceptable suffering and indeed threatens the country's opportunity for a new beginning. We've heard from my colleague about the situation in Rakhine State. Here, too, national unity is unresolved with communal violence at stake. Widespread poverty has threatened livelihoods, including for ethnic Rakhine, induced a sense of insecurity and exacerbated tensions. There is no excuse, however, for violence or the persecution of the stateless Rohingya. Dire conditions here in Rakhine State and in neighboring Bangladesh have caused many Rohingya to flee, often by sea, a very perilous and frequently fatal undertaking. The central government of Burma has taken steps to restore basic security and appointed an investigative commission aimed at longer-term solutions. These steps are a departure from the practices of the former regime, but nonetheless, we urge reconciliation, full protection of all rights, including citizenship, and efforts to maintain security. We also continue to press the government to facilitate humanitarian access to displaced populations. To do anything less than these steps could also threaten Burma's broader reform process. Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, these kind of challenges speak to our need to remain calibrated. Although we have eased sanctions and pursued normalized relations to support reform, we have maintained underlying authorities as an insurance policy against backsliding. We continue to target those who interfere with the transition, abuse human rights, and perpetuate military trade with North Korea. In addition, we seek to ensure that private investment from the United States and elsewhere in Burma complements rather than contradicts reform. A quick word about the armed forces in Burma. They must improve their record on human rights and relinquish inordinate influence on the economy. We encourage, through our easing, these steps by not yet applying our easing to military-owned companies. We nonetheless hear from a range of Burmese stakeholders inside the country who urge us to engage the armed forces to build support for the reform agenda. In line with U.S. law and in consultation with Congress, we will promote reformist values within the Burmese armed forces that are consistent with a professional military subordinate to civilian authority. This is essential to seeing reform succeed. Deeper engagement, however, will require a severing of military ties with North Korea and a firm commitment to the principles of democracy. Mr. Chairman, in the past, Burma's military regime met these challenges with brutal force and repression. The reform efforts of the current government, however, offer an opportunity for a broad range of Burmese, in and out of government, and indeed even from among the exiled community throughout the world, to participate in a process that shows promise for improving rights, transitioning to full democracy, and achieving genuine national unity. Finally, let me offer, Mr. Chairman, that assistance from the international community is critical for the success of this process, and our policy seeks to ensure that reform becomes irreversible. Burma also faces a number of significant milestones over the next couple of years that are closely linked to the success of reform. Next year, Burma will assume its first rotation as ASEAN chair, a prominent leadership role in tackling complex regional issues and engaging the Pacific powers. Also next year, Burma will undertake its first census in decades, the results of which will shape its political and economic landscape for years to come. And in 2015, the government and the country has its first opportunity in the post-military regime era to hold multi-party national elections that adhere to international standards. We will continue to support Burma in these and other efforts, and in doing so, we'll continue to elevate human rights as a central component of our bilateral relationship. We deeply appreciate the strong partners we have found within Congress on the range of issues related to Burma, and we look forward to continuing this very important partnership. Mr. Chairman, I've been associated with our Burma policy for 15 years. I've lived in the country for 3 years. I truly recognize an unprecedented opportunity for change. With that, I'd be happy to join my close collaborator, Assistant Secretary Posner, in answering any questions from the Commission. Thank you.